I'll be demonstrating how to do garter stitch short row decreases. These are commonly used in shaping in a crescent-shaped shawl. So it has the garter stitch, but we want to work shorter rows, meaning not all of the stitches for a prescribed amount of time, to give it that crescent shape that it is named for. This type of a short row has no wraps. We're just going to work decreases at regular intervals. I like to work it with locking stitch markers because with garter stitch, especially when you get into finer yarn and maybe some fuzz, it's difficult to actually sometimes read where you do need to work your decreases. So I find that these markers are quite helpful. Your pattern will tell you how far to knit across your row. So for me, I'm going to, in this swatch here, knit across for 14. I count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Here's where I'm going to knit to. So we're just going to regular old knit till we get there. And I really like what this does to a piece. It makes for a very nice shaping without having to worry about having wraps to pick up. So, and with the huge popularity of shawls, you'll start to see this more and more in patterns. So let me check my counting. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, just 3 more. So basically what we are doing is we are knitting to a certain number of stitches past the center, and you don't need to worry about doing that math. Your pattern will do that for you. So what I'm going to do is knit the prescribed number of times, and then I'm going to hang a marker on my left needle tip. Then I will turn, and your pattern will ask you to knit a certain number of stitches. I'm going to be doing 4. Now you'll notice right away that in regular short rows we slip this stitch because our working yarn is on the left hand needle, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to go ahead and of course get your yarn in the knit position, and we're going to knit 4 stitches. Now your shawl may have, or pattern may have, a different number, but we're going to work 4 here. So, and then the next thing I'm going to do is then hang my marker again on my left hand needle and turn. So I have now worked the setup. Get everything all straightened away here for you. So these 4 stitches here that are in the middle, those are our center stitches. Every time we work across the rows, those stitches are going to be more and more of them. So we're going to be, our short rows will get longer and longer until we have knit all of the stitches in our piece. So we have these markers here, and now we're ready to begin. This is the right side of the fabric. Opposite, of course, is the wrong. So what we're going to do is knit to 1 stitch before the marker. Now some patterns will say knit to 1 stitch before the gap. This is why I like to use markers. I think this gap can be kind of hard to see with the dense nature of garter stitch. So we're going to knit to 1 stitch before the marker. Now here I am. And I'm going to take my marker out. And then I'm going to work that last stitch before the gap and the stitch after it together in an SSK. So we do an SSK on the right side. And trying not to split my yarn. Work an SSK. And then I'm going to knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take my marker, and this time I'm not going to clip it, I'll just put it on here. Hang the marker on your left hand needle, turn your work, and now we are going to knit to, on the wrong side, 1 stitch before the marker. Now I'm doing 4 here, but your pattern, depending on how shallow or deep the crescent will be, these numbers can easily be changed. So working our way, you can see I have many more stitches to work across this time. So I'll knit to 1 stitch before the marker. I will remove this marker, that out of the way here. And then on the wrong side of the work, I'm going to knit the last stitch before the gap and the first stitch, just do a plain knit 2 together. Knit 2 together, and then you will knit a required number of stitches after that. So this time it's 4, 2, 3, 4. Placing your marker on the left-hand needle and turn. So when I turn, you can see that I keep working more and more stitches. Here's where I did my turn, and ever so slightly you can start to see we're getting this little shape here. But because we're taking stitches away and knitting them like that, the piece will start turning. I'm only going to be working 1 more set of repeats, but you will do the exact same formula every time. You will knit to 1 stitch before the gap or 1 stitch before the marker, work those 2 stitches together, and then your pattern will ask you to knit the required number of stitches and then hang a marker and turn. You will keep doing that over and over again until you have worked all of the stitches in the row. And because I have such a tiny little piece here, this would be my last 2 rows. So I'm going to knit until I get to 1 stitch before the gap or 1 stitch before the marker. I like those little markers. And I should know better than not to close it. Don't do what your teacher does. I left that locked. But here's 1 stitch before the marker. Take the marker out. On the right side, we work in SSK. So those are worked together. And when I knit the 4 that the pattern asks me to knit, or whatever number your pattern says, 3 and 4, I am at the end. So this side has been worked all the way to the end, but I've got 1 more marker, and I'll learn from my mistake and close that guy there. So on the wrong side, again, you always knit to 1 stitch before the marker or 1 stitch before the gap. You can see that if you have a large shawl over hundreds of stitches, that this can take a bit of time. But luckily, it's a lot of mindless, just all knit stitch. We only need to really pay attention to what we're doing when we get to that marker. So almost there. All right, here's 1 stitch before the marker or the gap. I'll get my marker out of the way. On the wrong side, we do a knit 2 together. And when I knit my 4, I have now worked all the stitches across the row, and now I have my garter stitch short row decreases. Happy knitting!